Scott, good to see you on camera. I'm thrilled to have you on the Housing News podcast.
It's great to see you too, Clayton. I appreciate you inviting me on. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Yeah. So Scott, before the show, we were kind of talking about like how things are going and like the mindset and the focus that we can apply as operators and leaders to help our organizations grow through this market cycle. How are you kind of thinking about keeping your team and your organization at Class Valuation focused on the right things at the right time?
Really, just kind of like you said, trying to focus on the things in our control right now and the opportunities we have in front of us, and not really get sucked into the challenges or the market headwinds that exist that are there. Those things are out of our control, and so keeping everyone focused on our ability to really transform this industry and do great things for it, and give us the opportunity to win market share and come out the back end of this market in a really powerful position, and just keeping everybody focused on that, right? Like you just gotta wake up every day and be excited about the opportunities that you still have, in front of you right now.
Yeah. So when I talk to our mortgage banking guests, we talk about people that are focusing in on expense management and like kind of controlling the size of the workforce and looking for technology efficiencies to build more elastic and sustainable businesses through cycles. As you think about the right areas to focus on for Class Valuation, a business that operates in the appraisal management and appraisal technology space, what do you think your levers are to come out stronger? Like, what can you do during this part of the cycle to really build something that's more formidable when we pass through this period of uncertainty and volatility?
I think we really, honestly, Clayton, it hasn't changed that much from where it was during the peak, right?
That's really good.
We stay our course. We stay focused on developing the best tools and technologies to power this industry. This industry has had a long time coming of opportunity to transform the experience for everybody involved, and we really try to stay focused on all of those stakeholders, from the appraiser to the lender to the consumer to the investor, and everything we've been working on up to this point really is still in play. And we know that's our ability to gain market share. The new logos that we're adding right now, the reason we're adding them is because they're excited about our innovation strategy and the direction that we'd like to take this industry, or help take this industry going forward, and really create a more positive experience for everybody. And we know if we stick to that, then we will win more logos. We'll continue to gain market share, and then when the market turns around, we'll be in a position to help everybody. What we don't want to see is people get complacent in this time. Like, appraisals are no one's yelling and screaming anymore about 4 or 6 week appraisals, and appraisers are calling in begging for work right now. And so they're not really a challenge, but we don't want to be where we were in 2016, 2020, and 21 ever again. We really want to solve that problem and be prepared for the next market upswing. And along with that, we're also focused on acquisition. We're acquiring more companies, and we're able to really find organizations that have great client base, good culture, and bring our technology into the fold, and kind of take what's good from them and what's good from us, and continue to expand our business through acquisition as well.
There's a lot to unpack there. So let's do it. So Scott, you talked about like kind of some of the pressures on the appraiser side changing a little bit over the years. And I was looking back at some past articles in HousingWire that you've been quoted in, and it seemed like in 2021 at Class and a lot of everybody in the appraisal world, the focus was on shortening timelines. And you talked about your ambition of a 24-hour appraisal. Does that ambition like hold tight, or does that kind of focus is that kind of lifted in this market?
No, it holds tight. It holds real tight. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready to launch a couple small pilots around that concept right now, and I think the opportunities are out there to be able to actually make that a reality with some of the new products and solutions that have come to bear through policy over the last year. I think the challenge is helping everybody understand those products in the right way, so they don't kind of look away because they had a bad experience and recognize the opportunity. For instance, desktop appraisals, that came out this year into policy. Some initial reaction to those products was kind of negative because the market doesn't really readily have all that information available at the time of list for the appraisers to use. And so if you send those products out without understanding that, you probably have a pretty poor experience, right? Because now you've sent this appraisal out, the appraiser either sends it back and you need to convert it to a traditional product, or even worst case, they go and complete it without the appropriate information. And now you're finding that 4 days down the road and you've got to convert to a traditional appraisal. And right now, recognizing you really have to supplement that product with data collection, more similar to a hybrid process that we've been working on in test and learns, it really changes the impact and the possibilities around that product. And then, something that gets me really excited and I don't want people to lose sight of, when the market actually adapts to these types of solutions. For instance, when listing agents are capturing that information at time of list, now you're talking about purchase appraisals getting done in a matter of hours, maybe less than 24 hours, but definitely within 24 hours, because that data is already there, it's ready to go, and the market has shifted and it's adapted to these new types of tools. But, we really need more than just the lenders and the appraisers to buy into that over time. We got to get the real estate agents and others picking up on the opportunities here.
Yeah. So, I think any type of innovation in the housing landscape or financial services period requires three things coming together at a relatively similar time. So the government and oversight, does this meet regulatory requirements? The technology capability, and then also market adoption, and in this circumstance, lender and real estate agent adoption that you just referenced. What have been, are there any other pieces that need to come together for the 24-hour or the couple hour appraisal to really be a reality? And kind of what's the bottleneck? What has been the bottleneck on seeing this innovation to full adoption?
I really feel when we start talking about 24 hours or less, we need to get to a point where you don't have to send someone out to visit the site, right? So that data was collected proactively at the time of listing for purchase transactions. First and foremost, when we get there, now all of a sudden that data is there. We can get it to an appraiser immediately. And within Class's world, we've built this full virtual environment for appraisers to work in that gives them a real positive experience and helps them with efficiencies as well. We can get there without that, but you're probably talking more 24 to 48 hours, and it really will depend on property access. And so right now, it's making sure that someone is there to get our digital capture specialists access into that home to go collect that data and get it to the appraiser quickly. We know we can once we have the data, our turnaround times are less, within 24 hours. So when that data is available, we can really get there. But the hardest part of it is getting access to the property and having time to get that inspection done.
How does this type of innovation? Yeah, it definitely makes sense. So how does a 24-hour appraisal change the rest of the process? And when all of the pressure on the timelines of appraisals and the prolonged appraisal turn times was on the market in 2020 and 2021, we weren't talking about hey, this takes a week, it's painful. It was this takes 3 or 4 weeks, and appraisals were really the bottleneck to closing transactions. But when we start counting in terms of days or hours, what does this type of innovation or this future for valuation change in the rest of the process? How does it change a lender's processing and underwriting workflow, or what a real estate broker or agent should expect as they're talking to their home buyer?
So when I think of it from that perspective, I really think about lenders who are driving to get to closer to a real time certainty of closing, right? Getting that credit work done up front, getting title work done up front, and getting it to a point where they can really bring that cycle time down to a matter of days, or even potentially at some point in the future. I've heard people say they want to send buyers out into the market with that upfront clear to close. And so then the valuation becomes a long pole in the tent. So we're able to get that down on purchase transactions. And really, we can talk refinance here in a minute and go back to 21. We've done tens of thousands of these within our organization and test and learn. And so we have a lot of data to show every KPI is improved, even when I have to send somebody out to the property to collect the data, in the process itself. And so it's really about helping lenders achieve that goal of bringing these cycle times down considerably less time. And I know there's many lenders out there right now focusing on that specifically. And so we want to be a partner to be able to get them there with this kind of information as well. And, if you think about also programs like ACE plus PDR, Freddie Mac's new policy that they released, where you're getting a waiver, you're getting more certainty. You don't have to wait, to understand if there's going to be some appraisal issues or whatnot, but you do have to go out and collect that property data to be able to support those programs. And they're pretty comprehensive and deep data specs around property. We collect a lot more information, a lot more accurately in a standardized fashion using these tools than we have historically through the appraisal process. And so if this technology is used at the time of listing, for instance, 3D scanning, which a lot of agents use to do virtual tours and enhance the marketability of their listing, through those same tools, we can actually collect those data specs. And so now you would also have the property data collection potentially able to drive those waiver plus, inspection-based type tools, bringing much more speed and certainty around those transactions.
Yeah, so the cost of originating has been such a front and center topic across the industry. And when you talk about reducing cycle times, that kind of flags a thought for me that when people talk about the cost of appraisal, they're typically referring to the actual appraisal fee that they're paying to an appraisal or an AMC, not about the impacts that the timing of an appraisal has on the overall process. And if you're able to pull forward a instant or close to instant appraisal at the front of the process, you reduce a lot of risk for the lender of working on loans that aren't going to appraise out and potentially substantially kind of increase pull-through rates from application to close.
100%. And think of the anxieties you're saving for everybody in the transaction as well, right? Like that appraisal is a big anxiety point for the seller and the buyer when they're in a transaction. Is it going to become an issue or not be an issue? And so the sooner you can reduce that for everybody, you're going to improve the experience around purchasing a home. And then something I haven't mentioned yet, but I kind of touched on it a moment ago. We've been measuring everything we're doing in what we call class the digital appraisal compared to traditional, and they're all improved. Every single KPI is better. And if we look at the quality side, we've had huge reductions in underwriter revisions, right? We have huge reductions in requests for reconsideration or reconsiderations of value, which is a big topic. We have a 65% reduction in the amount of times a consumer or a real estate agent or a loan officer, mortgage broker come back with that process to address an issue within the appraisal itself. So when we capture data in a more comprehensive, transparent, and standardized fashion, we reduce all these downstream inefficiencies that doesn't get talked about a lot. But, in the appraisal world, you've got, somewhere between approximately 50% of appraisals go back to appraisers from the AMC. And then you've got approximately 20% coming back from the lender to the AMC, going back to the appraiser, coming back to the AMC, going back to the lender. And when we see, 75% reductions in that friction, those are things that people need to be aware of, right? Like that's a massive de-frictioning in the system from my perspective.
That is wild. I've never heard the stat that 50% of the appraisals are going back from the AMC to the appraiser, and then 20% that make it to the lender are also going back. It is way more friction than I was aware of, Scott. What are the defects that are typically causing those initial files to go back to the appraiser from the AMC?
So there's obviously a whole host of them, but some of the major ones that obviously we've seen reduced in this process, it can be missing photos, blurred photos, dark photos, mislabeled photos. That happens a lot. And imagine if an appraiser missed a photo, they have to go back on site now to go capture that photo to get that photo requirement done. When you use 3D scan technology, we completely eliminate that. They're virtually gone. We have no issues because it's totally standardized and labeled for the appraiser. All of our technology is integrated with appraisers' formsware that they work in. And so this data flows seamlessly into their forms and it's controlled. Another is with sketches, right? So appraiser sketches, again, mislabeled, missing information, they're wrong, measurements are inaccurate, whatever it might be that come back through the process with complaints there. Now we have these super high quality, high fidelity floor plans that we're developing with interior dimensions, showing kitchen layouts and everything else. And they're, using LiDAR technology and photogrammetry to generate it that, just gets to a higher level of accuracy in a controlled environment. So you mitigate that as well. There's other things, obviously, that come up, a whole list of them. But the way that we look at it at Class, and this is a big part of our Data Master acquisition last year, is we're also trying to help empower appraisers where we control the data that flows into the form process from the MLS platforms, from the data collection on site. And so you're reducing typographical errors and things that are just really minor, but they do cause issues, and they do have to go back to the system to have the appraiser correct those.
That's interesting. Tell us more about the Data Masters acquisition. What was kind of the profile of that business and the strategic rationale and the capability that it brought into the organization?
Yeah. So when we hired Data Master, they're a product that's used to generate and support appraisers in the development of their market analysis and their comp selection, as well as it pushes all that data through an integration into their form, so they're not typing it or typing all that information in. And they're integrated with about 70% of the MLS platforms around the country in terms of a coverage. And so really powerful tool to make the appraiser more efficient with their time, saving anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half per appraisal when they use tools like this. It also helps a lot with creating a more objective and neutral report. It takes away subjectivity, which we all know is a big topic right now in the industry with appraisal bias, and it allows them to use real statistical analysis tools to support their outcome and have all of that data also flow into the form to support the decisions they're making it truly a database decision instead of more of a subjective opinion of like, this neighborhood is superior to that neighborhood. Well, let's look at the facts of those two neighborhoods and why you're selecting comparables from each of them. Median, it could be median lot size, median square footage, similar median sale prices over the last 10 years, cost per square foot, like all of that can be extracted through these platforms using MLS data to power it. And so we're continuing to grow our MLS footprint. We've added several new ones this year since our acquisition. And we're also excited to bring that technology into what we call the end-to-end process. And so, yes, it will still be a standalone product for appraisers to use in their practice, but it will also come into our virtual environment where now you can go everything from a virtual property inspection through that valuation development all in one place, creating efficiencies for appraisers and improving quality of the outcome.
That's really interesting. So appraisers were already using the Data Master product before the acquisition?
Yeah. Yep. About a little over 2 million appraisals a year get done through the Data Master platform. So quite a bit.
Wow. And so like through the network that you have a Class Valuation, does ramping the number of appraisers and appraisals that get done on the platform improve the quality of the data asset over time? Is that part of the play?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I would envision there'll be a point in time where we would love to see all of our appraisals produced through these platforms. And honestly, it's the opportunity in our industry right now. Every appraisal should be produced, whether it's our tools or someone else, right? There's other tools out there in the market that are pretty strong too. And there's just no excuse anymore in my mind, Clayton, for appraisers not to utilize these tools that are readily available, right? You need to support your development of these opinion of values using more modern technologies. And that's our main focus, bringing modern technologies into this process to really enhance the experience for everybody.
Interesting. So I know like an AMC kind of sits as like a somewhat of a marketplace in the ecosystem with the need to have active appraisers on platform and then lenders who are sending volume. Do appraisers start to kind of pick and choose their partners based off the product, the technology and data capabilities? Like, do you think you get more orders accepted by appraisers because of what you're bringing forward from your effort in innovation?
I do, 100%. And I can tell you for certain that the way we approached appraisal modernization with using 3D scan technology to support the hybrid appraisal process has allowed us to build a lot more adoption. I mean, we get started, a couple of years ago, and we do, I think we're still doing 2 presentations a week. Appraisers can just sign on. They're there every week to learn how these tools work. And over that time, appraisers come in very skeptical, right? They've maybe had this process where they've tried it before, where someone sent them a 78-page PDF document with two-dimensional images and a bunch of textual information they have to read through to try to generate this hybrid appraisal, right, where they're not visiting the property. And so our whole approach was, we need to bring the property to you to inspire confidence in the appraisers to feel comfortable producing these products, because they're still liable, right? There's still a lot of responsibility on the appraiser. And so that was our whole thesis, is like, let's give them what they deserve. And once appraisers come in and see what we've developed to support them in this process, they immediately transform from being skeptics to, how do I get more involved? And we've really built a huge adoption, even with some of the biggest industry skeptics. We've flown out, we've met with them in their office. We did one with an individual where we had their administrative assistant, we had their chief appraiser, a couple trainees, all use our technology to go scan a property, as well as they measured it themselves as measurement specialists, right? And being very skeptical of these computer tools. And then we sent them the results from the 5 different people who did the scan, and they couldn't determine, obviously, from one to another who actually did it. And they were able to see how accurate the floor plans that were developed in the GLA and everything else that came along with it was, and really transformed to say, not only am I no longer like, I'm not against hybrid, as long as it comes with a platform like this. I can do it if I have this kind of information and this kind of technology embedded in the process. And I really think that's the hardest thing, that our biggest headwind is facing other experiences that either appraisers or lenders have had historically with this type of product, not understanding that if you use the right tools, you get these incredibly positive outcomes, right? And some of them, I tried them 2-3 years ago, Clayton, when these test and learns or pilot programs first came out, and people were still learning and figuring it out. And there were some hiccups back at that time. And the industry has really advanced, ourselves and a handful of others that have really started applying more robust technologies to this process.
And this is a conversation we've had on the Housing News podcast with Mark Walzer from Incenter and Keenan Chen from Clear Capital. And
Keenan's a good buddy.
Yeah, and even like on the HousingWire annual stage this year, I think it was Joni Pilgrim and a few other folks were talking about tech that appraisers will actually adopt. And a hurdle being, some of the early adopters have bad experiences with different platforms 3, 4, 5 years ago, and they anchor on that. And that's a tendency to do that. Like, there's tools that are very commonly used in media businesses that I was an early adopter on that I've like sworn off, because like I think of certain data management platforms that require me to have like 3 full-time employees to even like run functionally, and that's not attractive. But technology changes over time. How do you help bring some of your early adopters, or not your early adopters, but early adopters in the industry, back to the table now that technology has changed, the UX is better, the functionality and outcomes are better? Like, how do you bring people back to actually see what's happened in the last 18 to 24 months?
It's hard. It's outreach, it's marketing, and it's engagement. With your, existing client base is a little easier because you have contact with them and you can get in front of them. But as you know, right now, a lot of our partners, they're focused on keeping the doors open, right? They've just gone through a reduction of somewhere between 50 and 70% less loans coming through their pipeline from this year to, from last year to this year. And so it's hard to get their attention right now because like any normal human, your focus is right now strictly on positioning your company to, survive a very tumultuous time. And that's where people's heads are at. We do have, though, those partners who know that now is not the time to be complacent, and so they're focused on working to bring these products to bear. But it's outreach, it's helping them understand that experience that they had is probably not the experience that they're going to have now if they try it again. I go back to the desktop product. Unfortunately, a lot of people they other competitors, vendors out there that support their customers, they didn't have the tools to support it. And so they also kind of, pushed against them as this isn't a really great product. This data doesn't really exist out there. It's not readily available. So it's really not a good thing. And so people are like, desktop appraisal. But they don't realize that if we get the market to adapt, Clayton, we get to 24-hour less appraisals on purchase transactions. Which real estate agent, which broker, which mortgage broker, which loan officer, who doesn't want that, right? So if it's done wrong, it's terrible. But if you do it right, and even today, though it's not readily available, we just put it into the hybrid process and we go collect the data. And we know, again, that when you do it that way, we get faster turn times and better outcomes on the back end. And I point out, like in 2021, in digital, we had some areas around the country where we were 10 to 15 days faster than we were in traditional appraisal using the hybrid process. It's obviously getting tighter now because appraisers are moving really fast and they have 1 or 2 appraisals a week on their desk. And so they're obviously able to get them done very quickly. But that's right now in the lowest transaction environment, the lowest appraisal addressable market than we've seen in my career. And I've been doing this for a long time. I hate to admit, but in 25 years, this is the lowest amount of appraisals that we've seen, right? Worse than the housing crisis. And you talk to people about that all the time in your other discussions that you're having. I mean, and you listen to Logan, I love listening to Logan each week talk about where we are and what's going on. This is a very difficult housing market right now.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I mean, we've spent the last 2 years saying, hey, when volume dies down a little bit, people will have time to innovate and adopt and improve their tech stacks. And unfortunately, it cooled down so fast. I think some people let fear get in the way of that extra bandwidth that they have to actually adopt new technologies and build for the next wave. But we know there are players out there who are focused on the horizon. So those are the partners that I want to partner with. So Scott, as we think about like just getting the vocabulary straight here, like you talked about the test and learn, and you talked about hybrid and how it's different from the desktop appraisal that may have given appraisers heartburn in a past life. Walk us through what your version of an innovative hybrid looks like. What is this product that's in test and learn, and how is it different from what appraisers and their lending and real estate partners might be used to from the past iteration of innovation in the appraisal space?
So I kind of break it into 3 spectrums there's really 5 spectrums of products, but there's 3 that sit in the center of what we're accustomed to today. On the far left side of the spectrum, you have your traditional waiver. No property inspection at all. Everybody knows what waivers are. They love it when they get it. It's certainty. Boom, you're done. No appraisal required or inspection. On the far right side of the spectrum, you have your full traditional appraisal process. The appraiser is the boots on the ground. They're out in the field. They collect the property data. They go back to their desk. They type the appraisal report. What we're used to is 1004s, 1073s, etc. What we're now looking at in the center of that are 3 more verticals. You've got Freddie Mac releasing the ACE plus PDR. It's an inspection-based waiver. Yes, you get a waiver, but we need to send someone out to collect this property data spec. It's a lower cost product because there's no appraisal required, but there is a site visit required, and you do need to collect that data and information. Next is the desktop appraisal, which today is available on a certain population of purchase transactions. And it requires a certain amount of data to be available for the appraiser to do their work, right? You need a floor plan. You need all the same images that you need for the traditional appraisal, being the bedrooms, bathrooms, living areas, et cetera. And the appraiser is responsible to ensure they have enough information to derive credible results. And so it's about ensuring that data is there. So then let me go to the next one. The next one is the hybrid, which hybrid is only available in test and learns today. And so this is something that is 3 years in. We've been testing these products ourselves, Class, some other vendor participants and different lender participants, where we go out and do what's called a hybrid appraisal. We send somebody who's not the appraiser out to the field to collect the property data. And then we take that data and send it to the appraiser to sit at their desk and actually do the work. So that's where some people think of that as a desktop appraisal, but it's really called a hybrid appraisal.
Yep.
And the expectation is based on the results of thousands and thousands of these being done during 20 and 21 and early, part of 2019, and going back to the early parts of these programs in 2018, we know that we have a high quality result coming out of these. So the anticipation is these will probably become policy in the next year. The hope is that's what will happen, but that will require FHFA approval and a move to policy. But when you've got, these inspection-based waivers are in policy, desktops are in policy, and so the next one to come is that hybrid appraisal, which so far, would essentially be a replacement for a full 1004 or a full 1073. Do you need that appraiser to go out on site? Will there be a certain population of maybe where you still do? Possibly. But with all of the discussions going on, removing the appraiser from the property and interacting with the homeowners and others is not a bad thing, right? And it also, Clayton, the other important part, and I'll pause and I'll let you respond, but when we use a hybrid process, we're also collecting the data and providing that to the appraiser instead of the appraiser getting to present the property how they want to present it. And I always go back to the housing crisis. I spent just after the housing crisis 6 years on the board of real estate appraisers in Colorado. And 99% of the time that appraisers appraise to a predetermined value or some sort of fraudulent value, it starts with misrepresenting the subject property. You can't pull in the wrong market data if you show the subject as it stands, right? So they would misrepresent it. And when we provide the data to the appraiser for them to base their opinions on, it takes away that potential for bias to be injected in the system.
So if I rewind to 2021 Las Vegas Valuation Expo, I was still hearing viewpoints from appraisers that, hey, I'm the guy or the gal out in the field. I visit properties. Like, that is part of my job. Like, sitting at a desk doing the computer work is not what some appraisers saw as the job of being an appraiser, and maybe didn't feel fulfilled in that type of work. So does moving to a world where more appraisals are done hybrid, that assuming the test and learn is successful and comes to market, does that require a change in workforce? Does it start to attract new people to the appraisal space that, might have different interests or views of what they expect out of work?
Yes, it might. And I will say, look, when I was an appraiser in the field, that was part of what I loved about it as well. So that's one of the things we can't really fix, although there will still be some field work. On the other side of that, Clayton, we have appraisers who don't want to be in the field anymore. You've got an aging population of appraisers. We've all talked about it. You live in Detroit, you live in Colorado, you live in these areas. Do you want to be tromping around in 2 feet of snow in the middle of the winter or going out in ice storms to inspect properties? Or do you want to sit at the comfort of your desk, maybe even in Florida, while you're developing opinions? You know that market, you appraise there throughout your career. It allows a lot more flexibility. And we have a huge population of appraisers that love it. They're not as loud as the ones that don't, right? Because it's always the people who are resistant to change that are the loudest, but it's typically a smaller percentage. And that's what you're hearing at the Val Expo. But some of it is valid, right? I understand those concerns, is not wanting that to change in your day to day. But the other side that you mentioned is it is going to attract new talent into our profession. Using these tools and technologies are more attractive to younger people coming in out of college that want a profession that's not walking around with a clipboard and a tape measure, and it's using cool analytical tools, leveraging more modern technologies. And it's a great way for us to focus on bringing new talent into the profession. At Class, we have about 150 staff appraisers now, and we do what's called a pod program where we have, I think, 10 or so pods where a supervisor has 3 trainees, and we're bringing new blood and new talent into the profession. And we're trying to do that in a more diverse fashion as well to really change the demographics of the appraiser population to more represent the demographics of the United States.
I've talked to appraisers, perhaps pre-second half of 2022, who fully adopted the hybrid or desktop approach, and saw their earnings potential shoot up because they're able to do more appraisals. And but that's a mindset shift. So I definitely not looking at this as like, hey, like losing the field work is a negative thing, but it does change the profile of the person who's going to want to enter the appraisal industry. Which again, if we rewind back to 2020 and 2021, the topic was that appraisers are aging out. We don't have enough new appraisers coming into the industry. We have to find a way to make being an appraiser a more attractive career option and bring more people into the profession. So it does seem like this migration toward hybrid is one of the things that enables our industry, your industry, to build the next generation of appraisers and valuation professionals.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, think of how many professional jobs today are office based, not field based, right? And so I do believe it's or remote. Absolutely. Yeah. You can go wherever you want. You have that flexibility. And, we don't need to digress into this today, but, there's a lot of talk about geographic competency and things of those of that nature. And I kind of challenge that a little bit. I mean, ultimately today it's a world we live in. It makes sense and I understand it. But when does it become more of a analytical competency? You should be able to glean information and understanding about market dynamics through data. You don't have to have geographic competency. And in some ways, I actually think it could be detrimental when you're thinking about people coming into a scenario with preconceived bias about a certain neighborhood because they live there and they've known it. And this is what they think of that neighborhood versus someone purely looking at data, analyzing data, and developing opinions based on that data.
Yeah, sounds like a good thing. So Scott, over the years, I mean, I've been watching and seeing the progress at Class for 5 or 6 years now, and acquisitions have been part of the history of the business, both in acquiring AMCs for clients and reach and geographic competency, and acquiring technology companies like DataMaster, like we just talked about, for capabilities. You mentioned acquisitions continuing to be part of the innovation roadmap. How do you think about acquisition strategies you look forward into 2023 and 2024?
We definitely think of along those same lines. And so when we're looking at potential acquisitions, we're looking for ways to improve our products and our innovation through technology that might be available within that acquisition. We look at things that can add to our business strategy. For instance, staff appraisers have been a big one in our strategy up to this point. Will continue to be part of our strategy, where we can pick up staff appraisers through those acquisitions, and then other AMCs in a time like we're in now, right? That's a great tool to continue to grow your business in a down market, and we're able to bring those customers and partners of these other AMCs value, because a small and medium sized AMCs, they don't have the ability to have these really expensive tools and technologies and to develop them on their own. And so we're able to kind of leverage what they do well and give them what we do well, and continue to grow Class and gain market share through that strategy. And we've had a great deal of success, especially this year. We've kind of, as you mentioned, we've done several. You learn, you get better, and we continue to try to improve it and make a better, playbook to do it right and make sure we're getting full impact out of those acquisitions.
As you think about areas for opportunity, whether it's certain mortgage product categories or certain types of participants in the mortgage banking space, whether it's IMBs or depositories or community banks and credit unions, are there any areas where you're seeing outsized opportunity right now for your business, or areas that you want to be more focused on next year?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the things that we work on bring value to all of those verticals. Class has obviously been, historically we've been big in wholesale, and so we think a lot about the mortgage broker, but similarly, like the loan officers in a more retail-like environment. We really want to bring tools and technologies to bear, though, that help our customer have a better experience. How can our broker partners that are working with real estate partners improve the experience for that real estate partner by doing business with Class? You mentioned it earlier. How do we bring appraisers into our environment that choose to come work for Class and put our work at the top of the list because we're giving them tools and things to use to improve their time value of money, as you mentioned earlier? Again, right now, I feel like I can comfortably say I don't know if anyone else has a system as efficient to do hybrids for the appraiser. Our appraisers don't have to read PDF documents. They don't have to type information in their form. It's all seamlessly integrated, and it's very powerful for them in terms of the amount of time they spend doing it. So they can earn more money doing hybrid than they did working in the field directly. So I think we're just going to stay focused on experience and ensuring that we're bringing our partners and their partners the best possible experience so they can grow their business, right? If lenders and wholesale lenders are working with Class and their mortgage brokers are growing their business because they're working with Class, that's how we're going to win. And we just have to stay focused on that area of the marketplace. Ensure we're bringing value.
Yeah, bringing value, helping your clients help their clients. I like that mentality. So kind of on the hybrid, we know that through test and learn, there is a regulatory approval from FHFA at some point for this to become, completely approved and mainstream. Are there any other regulatory topics or benchmarks that you're keeping your eye on? Like what's on the horizon from a regulatory perspective that helps really unlock innovation potential in the valuation space?
Yeah. So obviously we're very focused on hybrid and really hoping that's something that comes to bear because we think that's a very powerful tool. We're focused on bias right now and ensuring that the tools we're developing are going to make an impact there, and how we can continue to help, support appraisers and consumers to ensure we have the most objective and neutral valuation processes. But another one that's kind of under the radar right now that I think in end of 23, maybe middle of 23, you're going to start to hear people talk more about, and it's probably going to replace the buzzword of appraisal modernization because a lot of that hopefully will get to policy and this will come up. But UAD2, the Uniform Appraisal Data Set, has been in reworking that over the last 3 years. There's been a joint project initiative between Fannie and Freddie to update that data set, as well as the forms redesign. So what we know of as appraisal forms today is not going to look the same in 2024 as it does in 2022. And it's going to impact everyone in the process, Clayton. It's going to impact middleware platforms that support the procurement appraisals. It's going to potentially impact LOS platforms that are ordering appraisals because you might not know what you're going to get until the assignment's gone out. You're not going to order a 1004 or a 1073 anymore. These are dynamic based forms based off of scope and type of property. So at Class, we've been developing our data collection process to mirror what UAD2 looks like right now, and it's getting close to its final specification. But it opens up opportunity for innovation with change like that. And it really is starting to think about things in a more pragmatic way based off of what a property is comprised of. One example might be if that property has views and you talk about the subject property, now a view line is going to show up in the grid. If it doesn't have anything impactful, maybe it wouldn't, right? Maybe not the best example, but based on different attributes of the subject property will determine what that downstream analysis looks like. And it becomes a more process-driven valuation. And I think it will allow for technologies to come in and really make an impact in terms of how appraisals are developed in a more effective way. So, and I think it's going to cause some pain out of the gate. I don't think it's going to be easy for everyone to transform. I mean, the forms where providers, the appraisers, everyone is going to get hit with this. Underwriters are going to be looking at different forms. I mean, it goes on. And I just don't think people have been talking about it a lot. And I think it's going to come later this next year.
That's really good insight, Scott. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the IRLA update from a few years ago that had everybody on their toes. And I think that changes in the way that data flows from a regulatory requirement perspective can kind of separate the wheat from the chaff on the industry, the technology players that have their kind of finger on the pulse and have a seat at the table of what's coming. And it's essentially an opportunity to either gain or lose market share very quickly if depending on how ready you are for this UAD2 update.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right, Scott. Can't thank you enough for coming on today and giving us a glimpse inside of some of the the innovation happening at Class Valuation and the initiatives that you have your eye on. I think there is some powerful innovation coming forward for the housing industry, and definitely give us a lot to keep our eye on at HousingWire, because some of the innovation happening in valuation and appraisal will be important to powering some of the trends happening across the real estate world. And I got some ideas for some future content. So I can't thank you enough for this conversation today.
I can't thank you enough for having me. It was an honor to be here. I love what you guys are doing at HousingWire. I think it's definitely, if it's not in everyone's feed, it should be. I love what you and Sarah are doing with the podcast too. I tune in often, and there's great insight and information coming out of the guests that you have on. So thanks for having me, Clayton.
Dude, Sarah's beating me. She's like 5x the listeners every week that I am right now. So
Is
folks,
she?
if you're listening to HousingWire, Housing News right now, I need you to go to Apple Podcasts and rate the show and tell me how great of a guest folks like Scott are, so we can boost our spot in the algorithm. Because Sarah Wheeler, our editor-in-chief, is just killing me with HousingWire Daily. She's got that secret weapon, Logan Modashami, on there, who's giving her a boost. I don't know. She's doing a good job.
I was going to say, I love Sarah, and she does do a great job, and she's super interesting to talk to. Logan is definitely a secret weapon. He's obviously more interesting than guys like me, but and he's very, very smart individual. He's got great insight, so that's definitely helping her, Clayton.
We're publishing this, by the way. Sarah, I'm coming for you. Watch out. I'm coming for you. Housing News is coming for HousingWire Daily. All right, Scott, thank you. Have a great day.